Welcome to the Marshall Pruett podcast and our My Racing Life and Career series. This time it is a special version of that series with our friend, Uncle Bobby Unser, telling tales from an illustrious career on the mountain, Pikes Peak, something where Bobby unbelievably won his very first overall event in 1956 and continued that winning streak through 1986. A full 30 years of winning on the mountain, took 10 overall victories, spanning from the cars that he and his family, the Unser family, built at home in New Mexico, to closing that win record with the amazing Group B era Audi Quattro SL in 1986, knowing how important and how much Uncle Bobby loves the Pikes Peak chapter of his career. I figured, so many things about the man are well known. Let's dive into something that is a bit of a personal point of pride for him, that being Pikes Peak. And of course he delivers. I thought this would be 45 minutes to an hour. I am notoriously naive about such things. I believe Uncle Bobby gave us about an hour and 45 or so. And for the most part, it's classic Uncle Bobby. The stories up front, as I try to do here, this is not meant for children. Hit stop now. There are words that are certainly not meant to be heard until you're much older. Uncle Bobby uses a lot of words, many colorful, many that should never be heard in a church, a synagogue, or elsewhere. That, to me, is part of the charm, an accepted part of the Uncle Bobby experience. Everything from hand fabricating the cars that he raced with his family, making their own tires is one that I hadn't heard before, but it's just part of the family lore. I also love the fact that he sought out Smokey Yunick, the crazy Smokey Yunick, to do engines for him at one point. We also he retells one of the classic Uncle Bobby stories. If you've heard it before, you'll probably still love it, about what was one of the first onboard camera experiences, and the method that onboard footage was captured is still something that my eyes cross when I think about that. We have what I believe is one of the greatest series of tales, and that being involved with the Audi Sport program when they set the record yet again on the mountain in 1986, Bobby's close to that chapter of his life. And so much there involving Walter Roehrl, the team, technical sides, what Bobby liked in terms of setup. Mentions one point about toe out, the front of his cars being something in the range of 1.5 inches. I mean, just stuff that, if you know the engineering side of race cars, vehicles, it's just nuts. I mean, yeah, mouth wide open hearing that part from Uncle Bobby. Nonetheless, 10 overall victories on the mountain, one of the greatest characters, greatest drivers, greatest of all time. Yeah, just a true pleasure to get on the phone with our friend, Mr. Unser, and have him spin some yarn about decades of his life, what's known as Unser's Peak, due to the great success starting long before him and continuing after with his son, Bobby Unser. So I hope you enjoy this. He's Uncle Bobby. What else is there to say? You can get every episode of the Marshall Pruett podcast on iTunes, on Podbean, Google Play, Stitcher, a wide variety of platforms. And you can also hit our Marshall Pruett podcast Facebook page and get every episode the minute that it goes up. All right, off we go. Cover your ears or stop now if you don't want to hear some curse words with Uncle Bobby Unser, all presented by Cooper Tires. After seeing the amazing Unser's display at the IMS Museum and some of the amazing Pikes Peak cars that you drove, and your helmets and some of the other memorabilia, it's not as if I didn't already appreciate your Pikes Peak career, but I came away Robin and I were just in the corner looking at some of the things you drove up the mountain, and we're just laughing to ourselves like, we already knew he was a crazy bastard, but he willfully, without someone holding a gun to his head, climbed into that thing and set a new record. I mean, it was just added a new layer of appreciation for your record and willingness to test your mortality, I just figured, man, what a fun conversation it would be to talk about your career on the mountain and where it started. How did the decision to try and go up Pikes Peak come into your world?
Well, Uncle Louie, who won it 9 times, and those were overall wins, good wins, you know. And he was our big hero to all 4 of us kids, all 4 of us boys. And so we really, really, really adored this. If there was ever a hero, he was the hero. And that was the first hero. So that kind of pushed us towards Pikes Peak. We're 8 years old. You know, about then, wow. I could remember Uncle Louie, see? And every year, he'd come to Albuquerque. We were kind of short on money. Daddy didn't have any money. And so Uncle Louie would come down, visit us, and sometimes he had one of those Lincoln V12s. You remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he also had a friggin' Model B or Model A. I think it was a Model B. At any rate, it was like a convertible, top over the top, but seats in the back, seats in the front. And he'd drive that sucker all the way from Colorado Springs to Albuquerque and visit us.
Wow.
And that was really, really, really good. And it got us, what is Uncle Louie famous for? Driving and winning Pikes Peak. And so we all got engulfed into the idea, and Daddy and Mom never tried to discourage it. And then we started running the super modifieds when I was 15. Jerry and Louie were 16. And ironically, we started winning a lot of the races, damn near all of them. And so that made us to where we're a little bit cocky, you know. I went and ran IMCA a little bit when I was in the service, and didn't win there, but I was just there for show, you know, not a good car. And so then we come back, and then all of a sudden, Daddy decides to sell some of the stuff we had, and he sold my super modified, which at that time had won practically all the races.
Wow. Out
here. And that was good experience. And so Daddy took that car, sold it, took the money, and bought an old chassis. Oh, I can't remember the name of the chassis now, but Heliograss. I don't know. It wasn't that. But at any rate, it was like that. That would have been 51, 53, wow. Long in there. And because I don't know when I was 16. You can mark that down, figure when I was 15.
Oh, yeah.
And 16 started. But at any rate, that's how it all started. And then Uncle Louie, we could get just a little bit older and lying about our age, common thing. Man, I had more false birth certificates, good ones, you know, looked real. And Al got caught up at Pikes Peak, and I didn't cheat up there. In other words, but I cheated all over the country, you know.
Oh, well, you know, we would be just disappointed if you didn't. Let me ask real quick about the fake birth certificates. How did you conjure those up? Was there a buddy that was good at that, or did you guys do this back in the barn? I mean, that seems like a separate production effort all by itself.
We made them ourselves. You know, ironically, I ran the Mexican road race when I was 17 years old the first year. And it's hanging on the wall. If we ever get your butt down here, I'll show it to you.
I'll make that happen.
Okay, good. You promised me that before, so don't forget it. So at any rate, I'll show it to you on the wall. It says I'm 28. I'm 17, you know. Lying is okay, but that was too much of one. And you know who sponsored me?
Who?
Triple A. Triple A. Now, you think we didn't hang a good one on that? And I mean, my dad was riding with me, and maybe that's how they overlooked it. But, man, I look at the picture that you had to have in your life. I don't look 28 in that picture, you know. But we did, and it was fun, and didn't do very good, but we had car problems, and we didn't have a big team, you know?
So there...
And also there was I got into a confrontation with another guy. Father, he was cheating too. He had a real beautiful daughter, and her name, I forget her name now. But at any rate, he had her driving the car, and he was supposedly going to ride with her. Well, the son of a bitch was doing the same thing we did. He'd just get away from the starting line a little ways, and they'd switch drivers. And then he'd drive it. Because maybe the daughter wasn't that fat. I don't know what it was. She's really pretty, though. I know that. I was over there flirting with her, and boy, he jumped right in between us, you know. I'm always just a hog going to slop, you know.
Some things go without saying, Uncle Bobby. But it seems like for someone who grew up racing on the dirt, it really seems like there's something about the mountain that spoke to you early on, but I'm not sure what it was. Was it just that family history, or just the driving aspect of the risk versus reward? You know, it wasn't paved back then. You could fall off the mountain.
You know what I really think it was? Is your subconscious mind. Take Uncle Louie, take my dad, and Uncle Joe got killed in a race car up near Denver, in Littleton, and then you think that impregnates in your mind what you want to do, which is what we're talking about. And then when I go to bed at night, if I have to do things, like if it's Indianapolis, it'd be the same as Pikes Peak. I try to go to bed, and every night, as I lay down to sleep, start thinking about what you have to do or what you want to do. And that's where Pikes Peak comes in. Because if you just put it in your subconscious mind, it'll work all night for you. And then when you wake up, you'll obviously feel a little bit different than you did before. Motivation is another way to put it. And I had an awful lot of that, and it got me crazy about going to Pikes Peak. But even more than going to Pikes Peak was to beat Uncle Louie's records. Now, it's not because we didn't like the guy. Man, what a hero he was to us. But I knew. I'd go up there and watch him. I have pictures of me standing there when he comes through 16 Mile. And I'm just looking at thinking, God, I could do a better job than that. I could go faster. And the car is shitty. They don't know anything about fixing the car up. But I do. And at 16, I knew more than Uncle Louie did. And I wasn't trying to compare it then. I just would watch him run, and I'd say, man, he's off the gas too much. I need to get into that car. I could do better. But then it turned out that getting into a car happened because of my dad. Yeah, and so Daddy had kids that he could see were going fast on racetracks. And so I'm sure that he just took the assumption that if we went to Pikes Peak, that we would start winning the races up there. And I'm sure that that's the way Daddy thought it, because my dad thought way ahead of things. He's very smart on engineering and things like that, see? So he made it easy. Like I had that super modified. Well, you can run that friggin' super modified until you turn yellow. And nobody's going to hear about it except the locals. Nobody at Pikes Peak, nobody at Indianapolis, nobody at other racetracks. So you gotta make your way that way, which I did. And eventually it was time to go to Pikes Peak. I got the new car, but Louie had a ride with a fairly good car up in Colorado, and ironically, Uncle Louie stopped it. And that really, really pissed me off.
Wow.
So I gave my brother Louie my car, the Jaguar, which turned out to be a good car for the hill. I won twice with it. And then, you know, Louis would have won the first race, but when he went into 16 mile, the freaking brake panel broke off where we'd welded it, and so he threw it, and somebody gave it to us, back to us years later. Some guy that's been there. At any rate, that's how it all started. Louis ended up with local cars. Jerry just couldn't. He the first year he drove a pretty good car, and then after that, Chevrolet wanted him really bad, and so they hired him. Well, that's real money, you know. For the kids from Albuquerque, there isn't much of that real money, you know. And so he'd get into that car and he'd outrun Marshall Teague. Wow. Chuck Stevenson. And I mean, he became the instant star of the Chevrolet team instantly when they got into Pikes Peak, because they opened up the stock car division. Well, it made it easier on me simply because got rid of Jerry, you know. He good. Got rid of him in the stock cars. Louis was over the race cars with me. But to be honest, Louis was always excited about things, but he wasn't a real good race driver. And so he ended up, as we obviously saw, one of those super mechanics, thought way ahead. But Pikes Peak was into me, and I do it the first year, and then the second year, I win the dang thing. Well, I just couldn't believe it. My stomach was jumping up and down so much you couldn't believe it.
1956. I mean, and that's...
Yeah.
Boy, and the thing that I love thinking about a bit, Bobby, and tell me if there's anything to this, but when we talk about your IndyCar career, for example, so much of your technical knowledge, engineering mind, those things are so heavily associated with everything you did in IndyCar. Tweak this, change that, modify this. Was the involvement year after year in the 50s here, building and developing these Unser specials to go up the mountain, I assume that's really where you were able to gain so much of this early knowledge on the technical and engineering front?
Oh, absolutely, Father. I'll guarantee you, Pikes Peak was it. Here I was, you know, the first years driving for my dad, who was nice. There was no arguments. Boy, he really stuck by me good, but I generally went fast. And what I did is I spent my life never thinking about Indy, never. And I spent all of this subconscious mind working on Pikes Peak, and I figured better ways to build the chassis. Didn't have to be something expensive that you bought. You just had to be thinking about it a lot. What do you do with this suspension design? I mean, the cars look like they're ancient that I ran at Pikes Peak, but some of them freaking things really worked good and went fast because, you know, tires. We invented all the tires that ran up there until it was paved. Every damn tire that ran was done by Bobby Unser and or my dad.
Mm.
And that was done. That's how we got Goodyear into it. In other words, one year up there, they told me and my dad that we were not going to be able to run our recap tires. Now, we had humongous secrets in those tires. They for rubber, we had rubber with walnut shells in it.
Really?
And oh yeah, didn't you know that?
I didn't know.
Yeah.
What would the shells do?
Well, let me give it to you this way. Your wife has got a sponge, not a real fine sponge, but kind of a coarse one. She washes the dishes with it and puts it away. And now take that sponge and run it across the countertop. It can be anything, wood, I don't care what it is. And if it's dry, it just goes, nothing works. Slides across. Now get that thing wet, boy, you could push that counter almost, take it off the wall. And that's what it does to the gravel. It tears away the walnut shells and leaves a ragged thing like that heavy-duty deal that your wife washes with. And it just sticks to that dirt like you can't believe. Well, the road isn't dirt. It's ground up, it's pulverized granite rock. Pulverized granite rock. And these tires just get a hold of it, I mean, like you can't believe. Even the fronts where you don't have much design cut out with the grooving iron, it even helps the fronts. We groove them, of course, but the rear we groove a lot in the beginning days. And we would just take the recap tires, get them made in one day, run them the next day. Wow. So my testing was boop, 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 you know. So we discovered something extremely big. In other words, one of the biggest, you know, it's kind of like the gurney flap, you know, was a giant thing. Well, this was a giant thing. So they decided that they were going to declare them unsafe because they had a lot of money coming from Firestone. And so we almost went to court over it. Daddy got an attorney and started suing them because this was not a fair deal. Saying the tires are unsafe. It's not right, you know. And so we had them whipped, but then we were going to have to shut the race down until it went to court. And Daddy just couldn't do that. And, of course, I was glad he didn't because I needed to race, you know. and so we take those tires now, and, of course, everybody noticed them. Everybody just thought we're too poor to buy the Firestones, which is almost true. But look what we got. The only thing is, that goddamn Bobby's going fast. Well, I know what making the car go fast. The tires, right then, you know. And the Jaguar engine ran good. It was a light race car, but remember, Marshall, we had no money. There was no high tech stuff, except it was the first 3.8 Jaguar engine ever made. That's what my dad did. So the pistons came from all of our sources, California. The cams came from Eskandarian, and all stuff like that. In other words, we kind of took Jaguar out and put California in, because everything was made in California in those days. And so they all made it for us, and now I got a souped-up Jaguar engine, and it's a 3.8 instead of a 3.5.
Wow.
And that was the first ever. Now that's all the factory made for many years after that.
Yep.
They copied the cams, the pistons, everything, you know, even the rings, you know. And so at any rate, Daddy did all of that stuff, and you know, and put 4 carburetors on the thing, built his manifolding, stuff like that. And you know, everybody'd say, "Oh, why 4 carburetors? Why didn't you go ahead and do 6 or 5 or 2? It comes with 2, see?" And I says, "No, you got to talk to my dad about that, man. You got a reason for putting them on there. I'm the one that does all the work to it on the carburetors. I'm the one that knows how to tune them. They're SU carburetors, not Winfields like everybody thought we'd be running, you know? We used SUs because they're somewhat altitude compensating. In other words, that you're probably not familiar with an SU, but
I am. I'm the son of a British and Swedish car mechanic, Bobby. So
okay, then you know what an SU is. Yeah. Well, you know, when that piston goes up and down, everybody's got one needle down there, and it's got one little rod that goes up and down that's tapered. Well, we've got to run that Jaguar on alcohol. We need a little more power, that type of stuff, you know. And Daddy did all the stuff inside. We put the alcohol in it, and I made those goddamn needles and all fit alcohol in the jet down there. And now you got to do 4 carburetors. So just think how much I must have learned to run SUs from 9,000 to 14,000 feet and have it done right, and the engine never misses. I mean, and it never goes bloop, 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 you know, like a lot of them do, you know. Off either the guy puts Winfields on it, or injectors run at Pikes Peak, shit, he can't even hardly get around the first corner. No matter how much power he's got, the engine's blubbering all the time. Well, those SUs went just like it's like ripping a sheet, you know. And that was good. And nobody understood him like we did. But what did I do? I work on them every day of my life down here in Albuquerque, see. We're in the foreign car parts and service business. So I do at least 1 to 2 Jaguars a day, you know. So I know how to do that. And so that was really, really, really an asset. And there was other problems we had, you know, like in 56, I had the car handling good. 57, I screwed it up.
What'd you do?
Thought I was, yeah, and I did it myself, not my dad, you know. And I just changed some of the rear end suspension, and with the rods back there, it's real hard to explain, but it was a, pardon my French, fuck up, you know. And so the car looked good, but it wouldn't go fast. But I knew that I'd made a mistake in the first 1 or 2 days of running it in practice. So the next year, I don't have to do that same mistake, see. And next year I fixed it. But by the same token, then I got a car from Zink, or a part of a chassis from John Zink. And he sold the thing to me for almost nothing. Denny Moore was still alive then, and John. And they made sure they'd built a brand new Pikes Peak car for my brother Louie. And they put the money into it naturally. And it was a beautiful, nice, looked like a Champ dirt car. Had a nice nose, nice tail, you know, nice looking stuff. Good steering gear. Everything was nice on it. And they didn't sell me the engine, didn't sell me all the pieces, no rear end, because I don't want their rear end. That's one thing I'd have paid them to keep, you know, because my rear end going to be way better than theirs. Now, they finished 5th with Louie. I ran that car. I owned the car, fixed it up the way I thought it should be, and set a new record. Now, I needed their money really bad then, so I bought an old junk airplane with the extra money, so I could go to California and race every weekend. So Pikes Peak had a lot of things that it gave, and it got me helped with my contracts and money with Goodyear. That's where my first one came from. And Goodyear really loved going up there with us. And, you know, I did a thing that wasn't too nice. I prevented a lot of the other... Now, remember, when Goodyear started making the tires, we're just copying what we learned on the recaps. Still putting walnut shells in them. Yeah. Goodyear hated this, you know, because they said it poisoned their whole factory. They said they had walnut shells in their friggin' offices. I mean, they used to tease me about that so bad they couldn't understand why it worked. But pretty soon they saw it did. So they built the tire, and I ran the tire, but I wouldn't necessarily let the other guys have them. I know that wasn't fair, but it was my deal. And, of course, they took that right away from me. You know, the hill climb guys just talked to me and said, Bobby, you can't keep doing this. And I was about finished up there for a while until I went back with Audi, see. Well, Audi really finished off Pikes Peak for me in the best way that I think a human being could ever do it. Because, you know, I had problems understanding them in the beginning. They had problems understanding me, but we ended up getting along really good because my development was always really good, and they just learned to basically do what I asked, and the mechanics and stuff, and that was a capture. I'd been gone for 12 years. Yeah. And when I went back with Audi, I mean, I've got the newspaper clippings on the wall here. If I ever get your butt down here, you'll read them.
Yes, hopefully. I will.
but at any rate, you know, it said, you know, and some of them in the editorial column say Bobby Unser has been gone for 12 years. He's going to have a big surprise when he comes back. The Pikes Peak wasn't standing still when he was gone. And, of course, these are people that don't go racing, you know. What they didn't realize is that, man, for that 12 years I was gone, man, I won a lot of races, did a lot of races, got a lot smarter, you know, really got high-tech smarts. Now, I became a real SAE engineer, and they just didn't realize this. So I went up there, and this time I really wanted to beat them bad, because I figured it's probably the last time I'm going to run. I mean, it cost Audi millions to do this, one of these programs, you know. And you know how those European spins, you know. And so I went up there and did all that, read all the articles that were kind of negative to Bobby Unser, and just beat their asses so bad it wasn't even funny. Every day in practice I beat him. Every day, like qualifying, I beat him really bad. In the race, really bad. And that's what it takes. And you know what? I couldn't tell you. If you threatened to kill me right now, I couldn't tell you if they even paid me or not.
I'm sure they paid you. We can go ahead and guarantee that.
Well, you know, it wasn't they would have owed me. Money wasn't important. I wanted to go up there and win one more time. I had reasons for the numbers. And, man, I worked hard on that one. I mean, really hard. I mean, I grooved my Michelin tire. Had to run Michelin up there, so they wouldn't get their grooving iron up there so I could design some different treads. So screw it. I just called Albuquerque and had somebody send it up and did it with my own. And first they was mad at me. And then when they saw that I went faster every time, the Michelin guy started being nice, started learning why I was doing it that way. And that whole deal was, at the party that Audi throws, for example, they do this, at least at Pikes Peak races. When it's over with, they go rent that big place. It burned down in the big forest fire up there, but they rented that ranch, and they got the country singers, and I mean everything, just first class. And Michelin, now they had their friggin' deal up there all the time to groove the tires, and they grooved Bobby Unser, took a brand new one and grooved Bobby Unser on the top of it,
wow,
around the tread. So they finally admitted that I was right, and that what I did was okay, and they won the race, you know. So they were all happy. So that was the caption of what burns inside of me, you know, things like that. To be able to see it, you know, I learned the tire grooving back in running the modifieds, run the sprint car. Man, if you didn't groove tires in the old days, you didn't race, you know. Now all of a sudden it's important, and I'm doing it. It's something that the company is spending probably in the neighborhood, I'd say, $2 to $3 million on, and they want to win. But of course, I want to win more than them, I think, you know.
Well, let me take you back just a little bit on Pikes Peak, because I want to come back to Audi as honestly something that I've been wanting to learn more about forever. But you tell an amazing story about, I guess, one of the first in-car cameras to go up, or just period in motor racing.
Yeah, it was the first anybody ever knew about. You know?
So, yeah, today we think of mounting a little camera to a roll hoop or something like that. Bobby, could you tell us about mounting something to the roll hoop and your first in-car camera experience? This is the craziest thing ever.
You know, it was Fred, what the hell was his name? God damn it, you'd remember it. Oh, California. He was one of the early photographers, guys that were hung up on racing. And so now I'm at Pikes Peak, and Fred, I can't remember his last name right now, but he's got an assistant, a helper, whatever you want to call that. And they're trying to, and they're shooting an awful lot of me because there's a good chance I might win the race. And I've already won a bunch of them by then, you know. And so this guy comes up and he says, I need to do a camera from the car, riding. And I looked at him, and I don't even know if I answered him. That's stupid. And so the guy says, well, no. So the guy says, no, you get killed. You can't do that. I'd have to go too slow, way too slow. No, he says, I'll get on that thing. And he says, I'll hold on and hold. Now, these are when the cameras were great big. You know, those, what were they, 35 millimeter?
Oh, well, yeah, they would have been big and heavy for sure.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I can't believe it. And so this guy says, I can do it. And I said, well, what are you going to stand on? I'll stand. I got 2 shock absorbers in the back, naturally. So he says, I'll stand on the shock absorbers and straddle the tail. And I said, well, that's a stupid friggin' deal. I said, no. The minute I get on the gas a little bit, even if I don't go fast, you're just going to go off backwards. You're going to break your camera. You're going to break your neck, arm or leg or something. No. And I says, it ain't going to work. He says, I'll do it. And Fred just kind of shrugs his shoulders and walks away, you know. So I thought, well, okay, I'll show the guy and I'll get it up to about 15 miles an hour. He'll already fall off by then. And so he gets up on the 2 shocks. Now, the roll bar's right in front of him. The roll bar is. So, and it's a real small, I think it was illegal even, so small. So he gets up there and he realizes this is not going to work.
A man trying to stand on the back of your Pikes Peak Roadster with a camera, standing on the rear shock tower.
Yeah.
Holding
this
this
big,
big,
how he's going to do this.
bulky camera.
This is the good part. He stands up there. His balls are down on the tail where it goes down there, you know. And he can tell right away that he ain't got nothing to hold on to with. So what he does, he's got a leather belt, so he unhooks his belt, puts it around the roll bar, and tightens the belt up. Well, this is no joke, I'll tell you. He really did this. And so we take off. Now, I definitely am not going to run real fast because, number one, the guy weighs over 200 pounds, so he's going to put too much bite on the rear, you know. But okay, I mean, I'll show him, you know. I'll try to do my best too, you know. So I take off. He gets up on that sumbitch and he wiggles around and tightens everything up. He says, "Okay, I'm ready." Well, now it takes a rope. We had to start these things. They didn't have bumpers, so we start them with a rope. Pickup truck, pull it just a little bit and kickstart it with the turn the rear wheels over, you know. So I got her lit, and I take off, and I told the guy, I said, now, you got the camera in one hand. I think he had it in his right shoulder, but I don't remember. And I take off down the road, and I said, now you tap when you want me to quit or slow down. Just tap me on the shoulder. And so I take off and go. Now there's where the film came from. And the son of a bitch didn't fall off. and
So
I was real careful. When I'd shift gears, I'd go really easy. But, you know, when he doesn't come off right away, I think, well, I'll go a little faster. And when he doesn't come off then, pretty soon I'm going a little faster, you know. And he still doesn't fall off. Now, I don't know how that guy did. First place, his balls must have been made out of steel to do something like that, you know.
I love it. But
that was the first movies that ever, I think, came out of a moving race car aborted, you know.
But I mean, who else, Bobby, but you would go up the mountain with a human being strapped to the roll hoop just by his waist belt, nothing, keeping his legs affixed to anything. You effectively went up the mountain. I realized you weren't going full speed. You couldn't. I mean, the thing probably would have rolled over with all that, all
that weight up.
Oh, yeah. But still, just the fact that you were willing to go up the mountain with the crazy bastard strapped to the roll hoop to get footage, that has to be one of the bravest human beings ever.
Well, and when you're young, you're crazy, and you're very mischievous, and you'll do just damn near anything, And racing, I just had to race, and Pikes Peak basically saved my life as far as money went. Bought my first airplane. That meant I could go to, if you want to call it an airplane, but it made me where I'd go to California every week. So Pikes Peak provided that for me, and provided enough money for me to own my own race car, and that's the one the guy rode on, and I physically owned that car, and I didn't make I'd make $50 a week, but I called Goodyear somehow or another. I talked them into building tires. Think about this, the first 2-ply tires came right from me through Goodyear. In other words, I'm talking to a guy I don't even know on the phone one day at Goodyear, and I'm asking him, can he do these certain things? And I got to the 2-ply casing, and I says, can you make a 2-ply casing?
Yeah.
He says, of course. And now this is an engineer I've never met. And he says, well, what do you want? And I said, well, I got to have the tire light. It's got to be light. It's a flywheel that you're trying to swing,
yep.
And you're going uphill, so it makes it a little heavier. The fact you're going uphill, and so he says, okay. I says, then all that extra rubber that goes on the outside, you guys use for your weather protection and so on. And he says, yeah. I said, I don't need that. Get rid of all of that. I said, that shoulder, make the shoulder lighter. Pretty soon, I got a friggin' light tire.
Wow.
And they made them, and they sent them to Albuquerque. I tested them first. One of the turns is in the house. I built a little dirt track here, really small. I'd run it in second gear. But just to see if the tires were flexible, did they get a hold on sand? Well, I had to take my head and go from sand to gravel, to that crushed rock. And I could do that. And I learned to do that because of running the modifieds and stuff, And so I designed, I sent one or two of the tires back to the Ford Museum, which they have now. And they were before we got to the 2-ply, but that's when I put the walnut shells in the first test ones. And those 2 tires don't even have Goodyear on them. They don't have anything, no writing. In other words, they were just building stuff fast and not worrying about they're going to have to make another mold to put Goodyear on it, and the sizes and the D number, and stuff like that, of which we didn't have to worry about in the test ones. So these were the original ones, the original of the original. So I sent them back and gave them or loaned them, whatever I did, to Ford, and not because Ford was involved, but because of the museum. And so after that, they realized that the walnut shells have to exist, and then they started on the casings. And now we're down to 2-ply. How light can we make them? Oh, then my demand, or asking, not demand, but asking, was can you make a 2-ply tire as strong as a 4-ply? The guy says, yeah, for sure. And I says, can you make it as strong as a 6-ply? And he says, absolutely. I says, 8-ply? He says, now you're pushing me too hard. How come you need one that strong? You running a trailer or what? I says, forget about it. I just wanted to know what kind of strength you could put, So I got them made as 4-ply strength. but 2-ply casing and no extra rubber any place. In other words, they just practically paint the rubber on it, like with a brush, you know. And those goddamn things they won everybody had to run them. And they finally took my ability to keep them away from everybody. But all of that development was done at Pikes Peak, or right here where I'm sitting in Albuquerque. It was fun, man. And I found the original blocks. Goodyear sent me originally. You know, I talked to some guy. His name was Ted something, and he's the guy I got into this with, and we start into it, and he doesn't know what I'm talking about. And I want to make sure that he's doing it right. So they sent me some little rubber blocks. They were about 5 inches long, about 3/4 of an inch thick, and probably 2 inches wide. And they just sent them down to me in a little dinky cardboard box and said, pick what. They're all three have walnut shells in them, but different sizes and different amounts. So he said, pick out what you want. And so, like a scientist, I picked out the one I wanted. and apparently I picked good, but it's not because I was super smart. It's just because it looked like I needed that certain one, you know? And so all of them after that were built the same. They built thousands of tires. I used to keep all the tires here, and I wouldn't let the guys... This I shouldn't tell you probably, but the guys that I thought could outrun me, had a good chance, I wouldn't let them have the tires. I know it. I know.
You think these things are a surprise. That's the best part. I'm like, well, of course. I mean, you know, look, we know the way that you went racing, Uncle Bobby, and it was to be the best, to win, to have an unfair advantage, whatever advantage that you could. So, you know, generosity... is something over the dinner table. Generosity on the racetrack, I've never really heard that as, you know, a big component in your approach to the sport.
Yeah, you know who had to get the tires, the fastest guy, was my brother Al. Man, I hate to let him have those good tires, you know. I did all the development. He sat on his dumb ass, and I have to give him the tires too. But I didn't mean that about Al, really. I mean, Al was fast up there, and just no question about that, you know. He could go fast. If I had anything on my car up there, he'd nip across me real quick, you know. Kaboom.
So let me ask a couple of other quick things about the mountain. So, what was it that you found, Bobby, was needed to be fast up the hill? And I know, you know, it's a general question. You've driven many different cars up the hill, so there's no single answer. But what were the things that you looked for in whatever you climbed into to get the handling right, knowing that there are slow technical sections, there are fast, holy crap, if something goes wrong, I'm dead sections? I mean, there's so many compromises I'm guessing you would have to make so a car worked as well as possible across all corners. But I don't know if that's the approach you took, or if you said, hey, I'm going to have to give up some speed in these types of sections because I know that I really need to be fast over here. Just curious your mindset of what you needed to make a car go quickly up the mountain for you.
Well, most of it would be like in handling, of course. And in making the car run up there, making it have more horsepower. I mean, Smokey Unit built my Ford engine that I ran up there in a stock car one time and set a record with it. And what I did with Smokey is I just talked to him on the phone because we talked the same language. And so I tell Smokey, well, this is the little problems we have, and this is what you might look for. He'd never been to Pikes Peak. And so he built me an engine, and that friggin' thing was a goddamn rocket ship, you know? And I mean, that's another typical Smokey unit. And he said if they want to protest it, they can't do it until I get there. No one is to take that engine apart except for me. And so he says, if they protest you, I'll fly up and take it down for the officials, But that was in that one stock car. But in making cars go fast up there, two things are really, 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 or three things. One, it's got to get a lot of side bite because the gravel is really loose, and it's got to get a lot of forward bite. Now, those are two separate ways to go, but you have to get it. Otherwise, it's not going to be a super good car. So how do you do that? Well, man, I used to have toe-in settings up there that nobody on earth would ever believe or know about. And I just do it without asking people. I do toe out some places, like on the front end, run a lot of toe out. Nobody would ever go this far. Nobody would even dream of it. It's going to go real smooth. The front end's going to turn now where it didn't before. Now I'm going to take the rear end of the same car, and I'm going to tow that thing in like inch and a half.
Wow.
I hate to tell this, I did more to the front than you'd ever believe, and more to the rear. I mean, the smartest guys in the world wouldn't do that.
But that's going to help. That's going to get the car rotating and just create. It sounds like create a nice, predictable drift.
Forward so fast, it's like putting a rock in a slingshot and letting it go.
Wow.
I mean, throw you back in that seat so hard you can't believe it. And Audi was really careful, like in the beginning, on some of this stuff because, number one, they had one of the bigger racing teams in the whole world because of their rally racing, and they figure, being in that stuff, that they have the answers to most everything, toe steer, toe bump, percentage front and the rear. I mean, all of these things. They thought they had it down pat, but they figured out they didn't. Peugeot, for example, was a smaller engine, but it was a smaller car and lighter. And it was really faster than the Audi. And they had their test track over at Michelin testing grounds in France. And I went over there, and Peugeot they had a road course gravel track made, I don't know, it was a mile and a half, 2 miles around. And I went over there and took a rally car. Walter Roehrl was there.
Absolutely.
And he drove me around for 4 laps, I think it was. Yeah. And I told him, I said, I'll just ride with you. And I borrowed a helmet because all my stuff got lost on the airplane. So I borrowed a helmet and got in that thing and rode with him around there. And I'm thinking kind of the same thing. I said, wow, this cat sure does it different than I do. And he's winning. He's really good in those rally races, And I'd never met him before this day. And so he's 4 laps and runs the fast speed that he usually runs. And then he pulls over there and they show him how fast he ran. They don't give signboards like we do. And then he says, okay, I'll get out and you can go. I said, no. You get over here where I am and I'll drive the car. And I said, you can tell me what I do wrong. Being nice to him,
Of course.
And so I took him around 4 laps and beat his record, with him in the car. And he just got out of that car and he was mad at the engineer. He was mad at the big boss because the big boss of rally racing, period, was there with us. See, the factory didn't want an American to drive it. They wanted to get Walter Roehrl to do it, see. And I said, no, it's got to be me this year. And I traded off. I did, 16 world records for them down in Talladega. And they tried 3 years to do that and spent millions of dollars building 3 sets of cars. And they never could get their 200 that they wanted. Shit, I did it on the first run that I did after I set the car up. In other words, I took the car back, set it up the way I wanted it, and I never even drove the car. Took the thing out, and I ran 206 the second time I was ever on the track.
Wow.
And they just couldn't believe that, you know. So it's the same at Pikes Peak. Now, that was an engineering crew down at Talladega, but it was by Pioch, you know, the chairman of the board
Yep.
of Audi, Porsche, all those companies, and he didn't want to give in to Bobby Unser. Instead of Walter Roehrl, that was his hero at Pikes Peak. Well, I played hardball. I told him, you guys, see, when I did Talladega, I never signed a release. I never signed anything. I never even verbally told him anything. It was all, I'll see if the car is good. I'll see if it's safe. That type of thing, you know? And there I got him a whole bunch of world records, FIA world records.
Yep.
And they just couldn't believe it. So they walk away with that, never do anything on paper. So I just nicely told him, if you want to advertise Talladega, you're going to have to do Pikes Peak with me. Walter Roehrl can go next year, not me. And so they finally gave in. So that's how I got my ride in the Audi deal. My brother Al tells me I'm crazy. He says, what in the world are you doing that for? He says, you already have shown everybody you're the king of the mountain. You have nothing more to gain, but you have to lose. He says, now you're driving supposedly the best car in the world. If you lose, what if you just slip off the road one time? Anything you lose, now your reputation goes to hell. Well, I couldn't go by that. I mean, something inside me told me, God damn it, just let me have that mountain again with a good car, and I can win again. You know, I'm 47 years old, whatever. Maybe older, I don't remember. But at any rate, I just had to do it. There's something in me that tells me I don't need the money. I have what looks like plenty of money by then, but I got to run again with a really good car and technology beyond this, what people can believe. I mean, a turbocharger that never shuts off. In other words, I flick a little switch, that turbocharger, I haven't even put it in gear yet. I flip a little dinky ass, like aircraft off and on switch, and that damn turbo goes to wham, 3.6 or 8 bars. Man, there's a ton of horsepower going to come out of something. Now I'm going to put it in gear and go. And it never shuts off till I shut that switch off. It would sit still, and it'd burn itself up if I left that switch on, sitting still, you know. And that thing just becomes almost like an airplane. I mean, when I touched that gas, when they came out for me to start testing, I had too much power. When you'd first hit the gas, take like an eighth, a quarter of an inch of the throttle, you couldn't control the car. So I had them but call over there, excuse me, and get 2 small throttle bodies made. Let's take, you got a windshield carburetor, you got hypothetically two butterflies. That's it. Opens up everything. Now I needed to have 2, but I needed 2 small ones that would equal the same amount of airflow as the big one when the throttle is open. It might sound confusing to you.
No?
But it's like a Holly carburetor.
Yep.
Holly carburetor, you push the first half of it, just 2 of those little butterflies open up. And you go to the last half of that, all 4 of them are open. That's what I was after, see. And those guys, by then, they had decided that, man, this cat, everything he asked for works. So we'll make it. And they make it as fast or faster than Roger Penske would. And Lord only knows I lived in that world for a while, and I saw what real work is, you know, and get things done in a hurry. I want another wing for Penske. I draw my own wing. I draw it on a piece of paper, give it to Roger. He flies his Learjet down to the race shop, gets that freaking thing made in a day and a half, a whole rear wing. Well, that's what I was used to. Well, now with Audi, they're doing the same things. They figured out now that everything's working pretty good with this American guy that's a German name, you know, and they became friendly and behind me instead of fighting me, you know, wishing that Walter Roehrl was there. Because you can't believe some of the things that I did to that race car to make it better.
Was different.
Let's
talk about some of them, Bobby. Well,
like the front end. You know, I told you the biggest secret I probably ever had up there, besides the walnut shells, in the toes and the toe ends and outs.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, some of the other things like one day I'm up there and I have the same problem. If I run 50-50 on the torque split between the front and the rear, then the damn thing just won't turn. And it'll go fast forward, but it'll come off the turn good, but it won't turn. Okay, so then you do a 60-40, then you try a 70-30. You know, you just keep going until you've gone too far. And I had to find the too far, which I did. But then I decided their cars, some of the things are designed like kind of permanent in the race car. One of them was the front differential had a limited slip in it. Now, I could have almost any kind of limited slip that I want, but I don't want that. I want a front end. I want the diff in the front to pull forward, but to be totally open, like you got a rental car. Okay, that rear end on that thing is totally an open rear end. One tire will turn without the other. All right, so now I want it on the front. Well, they tell me, Bache, the engineer, tells me, well, they can't do it. They can get it for me in time, but I can't just unhook it now because it runs extremely hot and it's got to have a big oil cooler. Man, I don't know why, but I don't want to get into that with them, you know. Screw that. I just need to get that goddamn front diff totally open where one wheel will turn out the other. And the rear, you know, the torque splits will all make a lot of difference. So at any rate, I tell them I got to have it. And so the engineer tells me I can get it for you for one test. You see, I don't know that they're not right in their design on some of the things. So I tell him, I say, okay, what do we have to do where I can make one run for maybe 1-2 miles? That's all. And he says, it'll run awful hot. I said, okay, but what do we have to do? He says, I can unhook the oil pump and get no oil to it. And it'll last you for maybe 1 or 2 runs. We've never tried it before. We always run a limited slip in the front. And I said, okay, unhook that something. Do whatever you have to do. Make it right now to where I can go try it. And so they unhooked the goddamn oil pump and the oil cooler and all that shit, which those guys are really fast. And got it ready for me, and I take off up the road, and God damn it, I helped that thing so much. I was just, wow, let's have a drink, let's get drunk, you know. So I'm going up this road, and I get up to the top end, and there's one long straightaway. Understand now, in my life, I'd never spun a car on the road at Pikes Peak. And think of all the races I ran, all the testing I did, the tire testing, all the things I did. I never spun one time. So, and it's because I'm afraid of height and I don't want to go off, you know.
Of course.
So at any rate, I'm running up this, and it feels so good, I don't stop where I told him I was going to do and turn around and go back. No, I'm so happy with what I did. Man, I'm legging that sucker, and I'm running up the straightaway near the top. It's got 3 little turns, like in the other end of it. And when I got to those turns, I'm probably running 135 miles an hour. And I backed off the gas to get to those 3 little jerky turns, and the fucking front end, pardon my French, the front end locked up.
Mm.
Oh, shit. And I didn't spin slow. It just went zoom, around. And, of course, I'm going too fast to be spinning out. And I'm in a bad place. It's a good 1,000 foot. You can see Cripple Creek down there, too fast. But I literally, and this is not any special talent, I just saved my butt. I drove it backwards until I got it stopped. And I ain't talking about going too slow. I mean, I stopped that sucker as fast as I could. But I had to look out the back, And so I real gingerly took it back to them. Told them, man, we made this discovery. Here's what we got to do quick. Get a hold of Germany and get this shit made. It's really good. And I told them about spinning the thing, And I'd never spun it before. And they got white as a sheet, I says, well, you should have seen me on the road up there.
Well, and,
I really got white.
Yeah, but that's the point is, we hear about I spun coming off of turn 2 at Indy. You don't really hear about spins at Pikes Peak. You hear about, anybody seen Unser? Where do they get out the binoculars and look down the hill and see how far you fell? So spins are a bit of a rarity.
Oh, they were so. Oh man, you just couldn't believe. This turbocharger thing that they had. They got that front end fixed for me, and they came back and had it totally open diff, and I didn't need any more. I did the adjustments with other things. The toe ins and toe outs were big secret, They just couldn't believe it. They finally, the engineer didn't even talk to the mechanics about that shit. I just did it. They all spoke good English, And there was just so much fun with doing things like that. I mean, breakthroughs. Man, oh man, oh man. If that road would have stayed gravel, my secrets would have lasted forever. Come to think of it, it's paved now, so it doesn't make any difference what I tell people, because those days are gone forever, see. I didn't think about that for a while. Every time we mention Pikes Peak, I think of it being loose ground-up granite rock, And that's where my expertise came in. And then that type of expertise I took to Indianapolis, of course, because I was able to test anything I wanted to test, any type of a development at somebody's cost, not mine, see. Bobby. The Audi people just became, when the next year, when Roehrl won the race, I'm down here in Albuquerque. I got a brand new Audi station wagon sitting out here that is the fanciest of everything they make, and I get a call from Joe Hoppen. I hit a racing.
Yep.
Hoppen, Hoppen anyway, and Hoppen calls and he says, "How you doing?" He goes through all that BS, and he says, "When you coming up?" And I said, "Well, I'm not going to go up there this year." I said, "Walter Roehrl left me alone last year, and he didn't come up and hang around looking at me and stuff like that. So I said, I'm not going to bother him this year. You guys know everything that happened. You got a record of everything that I did, and so it ought to be easy on him for a starting point." And so Hoppen says, "Bobby," he says, "I want you up here fast, quick." And I says, "Joe, you got problems." Well, he wouldn't admit it, see. So he says, "Look," I says, "I don't want to bother him." And he says, "Bobby, come." He says, "I will pay you the same thing if you'll come up right now as I did last year." Well, that's a stupid thing to do. It's like stealing, And so I told him, I can see they're desperate. They've got a problem. He is not going fast, see? And they would never, I mean, Roy would never try to copy my stuff because he wasn't there when I did it. He doesn't have any idea what I'm thinking, why I do all of these weird things, you know? And so I tell Hop, and I say, okay, I don't remember whether I took their station wagon and drove up there or whether I took my airplane, but I took one of them and left immediately. And I get up there, and I watched Roll the next morning. The poor guy is just not on that road the right way. He's driving it like you see in the movies when he's doing these rally races. And that's all fine and dandy, but it isn't going to work up there. So I sat there and watched him for a little bit, and his driving is wrong, and I know he's a good race driver, and it's wrong, but they've got the car all fucked up because he thinks he's running a rally race. So he wants it like he runs a rally car. Well, it ain't going to work, Father. I mean, it's simply not going to work, and I know that. And I don't want to make a fool out of him, and I damn sure don't want to make a fool out of the Audi people. But Hoffman wants me there, and he says, gets me up there, and he says, okay, tell him what's wrong with the car. I mean,
wow.
It's a little bit embarrassing, you know.
Yeah.
So I get Dieter Boschee, the engineer, I get the mechanics, and Hoffman. I made sure that Hoffman was there, too. He's got to be my buffer when they want to kill me, you know. And so we get a little meeting, and I told him, I says, Walter, I got Walter to the side so I wouldn't embarrass him. I told him he's got to change his driving style. But the guy is so friggin' good that he can go to any style. He's that good, you know. And somehow I knew that. And so with the car, I told Bache, the engineer, and the mechanics, I said, look, let's take a setup that I had when I ran it last year, and let's just duplicate that. I said, I know it looks wacky, but just for the hell of it, just make it the same way. And that was enough of the talk, and I did that. And then I got Walter aside, and I told him, I says, you know, you can't run Pikes Peak like a rally race. I said, when you see me pitching into the turn, look at the movies. They made him watch movies and movies and movies of Bobby running the course, which they had from helicopters and everything else, see? And so I says, you've really got to run it that way. I've tried every kind of way there is, and that's the only way to work. And you know what that son of a bitch did? The very next morning, he copied my words to the nth degree and set fast time for that practice. See? So the guy is frigging good. All I had to do was tell him, do it this way. See if you can. Well, I wanted to see if he could do it. Well, of course he could do it. He's a good race driver. So I had that part whooped. Now I had to worry about him being the designer for all these chassis changes.
Yeah.
You don't do that. I know what works. And so I got past that because I was there. And that was hopping again, you know? And I never billed them for that. I mean, in other words, I wouldn't do that, you know? But they needed me bad. Once I showed up, everything changed. It all went my way. He set fast time, and he outran the guy that ran the Peugeot.
Vatanen?
Yeah, Vatanen. Yeah. Now that Vatanen's freaking. There's a goddamn daredevil fast one, you know. Yeah, I
Yes,
mean
he was.
He gets on the goddamn throttle. He knows where it is. He looks like he doesn't have any brains sometimes, but that's like watching my brother Louis run, you know. I mean, he's the same way. But it was so interesting getting these foreigners that came over there, and they found out that a goddamn dumb American can figure that stuff out too. It was fun. I'm glad that Hoppen, for example, demanded that I go up. I stayed away from Walter, even when the press was around the car and everything. I just stayed away, and because Come on, he stayed away from mine. He was a good sport about it. So, and you know, if Audi had their choice, they'd have had him up there as a standby in the beginning, because they really didn't think I was going to be able to do it. See?
Bobby, where does this close to your Pikes Peak career stand with Audi among all the other, among the decades of racing at Pikes Peak? And also, I guess to close, where does your Pikes Peak career rest with you among all the other things you've done, right? So many people think Bobby Unser and immediately go to 3-time Indy 500 winner, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Pikes Peak, that was cool, but that's some back in the day stuff, not nearly as serious. I'm guessing that you don't look at your Pikes Peak career in that same way.
No, I don't. But later on, later on at Indianapolis, it was no different than it was at Pikes Peak, because I had acquired all the power. Power means what? Get done what you want done. Go fast. Get a better car than the other guys had. And I earned my way through Pikes Peak, of which we talked about a lot of it. But I took that same friggin' deal to Indianapolis, and I didn't do it in the beginning for sure. Man, I was on the backside of nothing, But I started learning things. Where I learned it like at Indianapolis was partially from Pikes Peak. Mm-hmm. There are other ways to go fast, other things you can do to a race car. And when I'd get a secret, like at Indianapolis, man, it might have come from an idea I had at Pikes Peak. You'd be amazed the crossovers that there are. And most of it is the determination to make sure that you're going to keep trying till you find something that goes faster. Now, I go a lot of years back at Indianapolis, 19 races in a row, and I learned a lot, and I got a lot of power. The reason you get the power, you win. If you win a race, and if you never win a race, you go fast in qualifying, and you practice fast, man, you're guaranteed the rest of your driving life. I mean, that's all a guy has to do. If he wants to get some sort of a guaranteed income in the Indy cars, you got to practice fast. You got to qualify fast. And in the race, really good if you lead it. Now, if you drop out, doesn't mean doodly dang, except for Indianapolis. But the others they'll forgive you for. But you were leading it when you dropped out. Boy, so I acquired this power. And I got it with Judd Phillips first. That's where it first came. Gordon Van Leeuw with VitaFresh. Gordon was a good friend and a real nice guy, but, man, he didn't want to spend money. He partied too much to spend it on the race cars. In other words, it just wasn't real racing. So then I do with Judd Phillips, leader card. There's a team that's used to winning. So I had it good there. If Judd and Little Red would have liked me, I'd be okay. Guaranteed work, meaning driving. So after that, I get in. When I got in with Gurney, now this was where my original good smarts came from. Because Dan and I, even though we didn't get along really good, he the only reason he hired me, Goodyear says, you got to take this man, he goes fast. That's what Goodyear's after, see? You got to win races. So I go to work for Dan because Goodyear says that's where I need to be. So I go over there and we fight a little bit, we argue a lot, but we were always good for each other. But we just disagreed on a lot of things. Well, some of them I won, some of them Dan won. But boy, did it make me smart. I always hung around the guys, the engineers. So Dan gave me my start on being really smart for the fast stuff, Indianapolis or whatever.
Sure.
He made me really smart, and then once you get a little bit of smarts, well, if your subconscious works, like I described, you're going to be going faster all the time. You're going to figure out ways the other guys haven't figured out. And so there's where I went with Dan, because he provided that going into the unknown, speeds that we had never dreamed about. Nobody had. And we were the total hot dogs of all that speed. And I really enjoyed it. But what I was doing, instead of hanging around talking to the other race drivers or talking to this and that and the other, I stayed around with the engineers. And like now, there comes a time, as history shows, that I left Dan. And there was reasons for it, you know. I raised money. I mean, I got him $1 million from Teddy Yip one time. Wow. And he'd spend the money on the wrong things, you know. But by the same token, we'd fight over that stuff a little bit. And then so I end up leaving him, or driving for him the second time, and then end up leaving him after that and went with Penske. Well, now, this was nothing more. Penske was like shifting the gear. You're going from first to second to third. You're really gaining the speed. Now I'm with Penske. Well, shit, over there, Roger looks at things different. Personalities don't take front row with Penske. You know, when he found out, he knew before he hired me. He knew what he wanted. He knew what I was capable. He'd apparently been watching me for a long time. And I didn't really care, because I wasn't even excited about going with Roger. Because now, most everybody would offer me a car to drive. I mean, I could almost handpick anything I wanted, because I go fast. And so all of a sudden, you know, Penske comes along, and we're at Ontario Raceway. And he just walks by. Well, him and Wayne, my chief mechanic,
Wayne Larry. Yep.
Yeah. Well, every race, I used to get so friggin' mad at them. Every race, they'd bet his $1,000 or $1,500 on whether Bobby was going to set a new record or be on the pole. They just would automatic. Now, Penske's walking down. I think this is what he's doing again. I'm getting pissed at Wayne. I don't like betting in racing. I don't like that. I had a bad taste one time. And so Penske comes down, and he just stands there with me, and he's looking around like, he looks up the grandstand, and he says, I'd like to talk to you. Are you interested? And, you know, I kind of jumped back a little bit, and I thought, well, hell, I don't know what's he interested in. He didn't have the really, really, really big team yet, see? And so he looks up in the grandstand. As you're looking up at it, it's on the left, up high. That's where he says, can you meet me up there? I says, Roger, man, you can talk to me any place.
Wow.
Man, I'm my own boss. I do what I want. I said, you can talk to me right here. Nobody can hear us. It's okay. And he didn't want to do that. It's totally, Roger is very private, you know? And that's how I got my ride. He says, are you going to go to England? I said, well, I think we are. Dan had already run through that $1 billion, you know? And long story short, yeah, I'm going to go. And so he says, I'll talk to you over in England. I don't even pay any attention to it. But see, by now, without me knowing it, the owners, the mechanics, they like what Bobby does. Somehow or another, it's good. Maybe I don't win every race, but I damn sure lead them all, you know? But at any rate, we go to England. It turns out really bad. So there I am over in England. I got to run 2 races over there. My wife is drunk every night. Mad all the time. I mean, and I don't even have a limited slip. I got a locked total spool rear end in the race car. God damn it. I mean, you talk about being wrong. That was wrong. And Dan just said he didn't have enough money to buy one, so we had to go with the spool. And so I do that, and then after, just while we're there at the race, one of the racetracks, Roger comes up and he says, hand me a little piece of paper, real small. Here's the name of the hotel. Here's the room number. Meet me there after the race. That's it. With Dan, I am finished with Dan. I want to be friends with him, but I'm finished with that team the rest of my life. No more. And I just got to get back to the United States so I can do all these things. And so I go to the hotel and meet Penske after the race. And just like it said, I gave the cab driver a little sheet of paper. I said, get me there. He did, and I went to the room. I'm sitting up there on the bed. Doors knock on it. Yeah, I know it's got to be Penske. Nobody knows I'm there except him. So he comes in the room. We both sat on the edge of the bed. No chairs, no desks, no nothing. On the edge, real cheap little room. And he starts telling me about all the things he wants to do next year. It's going to be some new stuff, and he needs a development driver. And I says, okay, can you tell me what it is? No, can't tell you right now. If he says, if we make a deal right now, he says, I'll take you tomorrow, that type of deal, you know? I said, okay. And I tell him, he says, what do you need? Do you want to do it? Number one. I says, number one, I do want to do it. Give me the number two. Number two, he says, I'll take you down. We got a helicopter, pick us up, and we'll go down to the race shop. Well, I forgot his race shop was in England, or where he builds them, you know. And so I says, okay. And then we talk. He says, how much money do you want? I says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do on that. I'm going to give you my contract with Dan Gurney. And I says, obviously, you know, that it's involved with Goodyear too. And so, therefore, it's no different than you're doing. But that's how much I want. And a lot of my conditions are in that same contract. Some of the things I'll do, some of the things I won't do. And so he says, okay. He says, send me that contract. And I did. Got home. First thing I did was send him that contract. But in the meantime, we get on the helicopter now and go down to the race shop, whatever little town that's in. Mm-hmm. And I meet all the guys in the race shop. Well, I figured out some of them are for me. I know most of them were for me. Yeah, most of them were for me. And so, but that's Nick Guzet runs the race shop over there.
Yep.
And so I go down the race shop and I meet all these people and the guys that are physically bending things and welding and doing things. They seem to all be for having Bobby Unser come over. And man, some of these guys, Penske's getting, I mean, Jesus Christ, I forget one of them. I used to poke his wife all the time. I mean, he wasn't taking care of her, you know. And so I'd go down there, and then Roger's really being nice to me. So you remember that fast jet that you could go from England to New York?
The Concorde?
Yeah, the Concorde. So Roger buys two. He says, you want to go on the Concorde? And I says, well, yeah. I says, pretty expensive, isn't it? He says, yeah. He says, but you know, he says, this might be once in a lifetime chance. You want to do it? And I said, yeah. So he took me on the Concorde back to New York, and I came to Albuquerque, or maybe I went to the race shop. But at any rate, now we start with Penske. Now over there, I didn't have to argue with Roger. In other words, he wanted me there to give me a chance to do something under his tutelage, under his team. And McGee is running it at the time, okay? And we run our last race at Phoenix, and at any rate, he sells the friggin' car. He always sold my cars right away, and because everybody wanted to buy them. And that's because they went fast. And they think that that my cars had little cheaters in them and all, which they didn't, you know. And so I didn't get along with the guys in England. That went gone without any more talking. That's just the way it was. So, but I'm learning Pencil, the engineer. I forget his real name, but we all called him pencil because he drew everything up. Well, he was good to me. He liked me. And he would teach me things that I could understand that normal people just wouldn't understand. I already knew how to draw. I could draw a wing. I got a drawing table over here in the warehouse that I used to use. I learned all that by myself. And I used to be able to draw suspensions. You know, I mean ride heights on suspensions and all that technical stuff I could do. I learned how to do it. Bump steer I learned. I went and got a book that Colin Chapman had wrote. And shit, now I understand bump steer. I went to Indianapolis that year. I'm the only friggin' American back there that understands bump steer. Watson didn't understand it. Judd Phillips didn't understand it. And I taught it to him because I just read Colin Chapman's book. And he explains everything in there. Just nobody goes to the library to read it, you know? And I didn't either. A friend of mine did. And now with Roger, I didn't have any problems with arguing about money. But remember, without Dan Gurney, I would have never learned all these little tricks that I was learning. You can't believe how many. Like the size of roll bars. That roll bars that you want in your car?
Yeah.
They were on a chart and numbers to the chart. And then springs. Springs had numbers with them. In other words, I could say, I want the chart could say, I'm going to pick out, say, 400 pound front spring. And I'm going to take out a 350 rear. Well, now I want X amount of roll resistance. So now I can get that via the roll bars and the roll bars. And Gurney put it on paper that you could read and not explaining it to you, just numbers that would match up. So I decided I want 4,000 roll stiffness. I could match up a roll bar and a spring, front and rear to it. And no driver's been able to do this. I do it because, man, that made me go fast. That was really a big secret. Well, I took that shit over to Penske. And of course, the guys in England fought me on it like it was the Civil War. But I had that knowledge in my head already. They can't take it away. And Penske would let me do it. So what he would do is he would let me be in charge of all the testing and the development work. And so I take what I learned at Dan's, which was a bunch, and I got smart out there. And then I would take it to Penske. Well, his guys were good guys, but they weren't into this, what I call racing science. You know, they just copied. If McLaren went fast in one car, all the McLarens would copy the anti-roll bars and the springs. And they'd get it to the mechanics at the bar or someplace, you know. And so I would do my stuff, and now I know something about it. I had the chart. Hell, I don't know what I did with the chart, but they were in my house here for a long time. Used it to some of the good years with Dan Gurney, you know. And he's the guy that really started me being smart. And I think I was smart. I just could, and I could do this to anybody's race car, you know. I mean, Wayne and I went down, put McCluskey in the field. He's going to miss the show one year. And I forget what he had. I think it was a McLaren. And at any rate, Wayne comes up to me because Tucson, come on, Roger was one of my best friends.
Yeah. He
and Wayne were raised together. And so we went down to his car. He's looking like he's about 1,000 years old because he's dejected so bad. And now we push him into the qualifying line. Wayne and I had already talked what we're going to do. Wayne's going to go up and talk to him and keep him busy in his thinking where he can't look in the rearview mirror and see me doing some stuff, you know. And so I go to the back of the car. Wayne goes to him, stands where he can't see out of the mirror, and I change some of the stuff back there. Plus I gave him some boost. you know. And he goes out and boom, makes the race. Now, the only thing we got to be afraid of, Wayne and I, is we don't want Roger to know it. He doesn't need to know it. And we can't let Bernie know it at the time. Boy, would he have been pissed, you know.
Wow.
Because we're using his technology to further another driver, which he was against. But we had to help Roger out. I mean, he was a really good. He ain't going to win the race, but we got to help him, you know. So when I was with Penske, man, he just opened up everything. I mean, the cars on the ground effects, shit. I mean, what do? I read a Colin Chapman deal again. Wow. Colin Chapman tells all of his friggin' secrets, should be his secrets, to the press. I couldn't believe it. But I'd take those secrets, he'd educate me a little bit, I'd get a little bit smarter, then I'd jump a little bit further ahead. Because everything they do takes months and sometimes a year to do. I do them overnight. Ron Dawes and I would sit over here and we converted my airflow bench into a wind tunnel and in models 1/6 scale. And we'd get over here and we'd run them things and we'd quit. I'd have a rule that we quit at 1 o'clock in the morning. So we did that until we knew that what we were doing was working. In other words, Ronnie or I, either one, could draw it up on a piece of paper to scale for 1/6 scale and send it back to Reading overnight. And I'd be testing that sucker, testing it, totally built on the race car in a week or less. And I did this over and over and over again. And I just I'd make them tunnels, design them right here in Albuquerque, send them to Reading. They'd be made. I'd be testing them usually at Michigan, something like that, because it's close by, you know. And the goddamn stuff always worked. And like when Rutherford turned that yellow car over in Phoenix that time, Jim Hall's car, remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a photographer takes a picture of that car when it's upside down. Jim Hall didn't design that car. That was done by an Englishman.
John Barnard.
Yeah, John Barnard. Yep. He did all of it. I mean, poor Jim, he lied about that to everybody that he did it. Well, he didn't do that thing. John Barnard did. And we always wanted to. He didn't know what the underground tunnels were doing. He had no frigging idea. I did, but I couldn't see the bottom of the car. Now when it's upside down, the guy takes a picture. I got it. You know, within a day and a half, Ronnie had already built a model. We'd already wind tunnel tested it in no more than a day and a half. And I mean, so we knew exactly how much downforce they had and where they had it, front to rear. Because a lot of our secrets were getting a lot of downforce and then deciding where we wanted it and being able to put the downforce at that point. That means a point front to rear in the car, you know. And that was hard to do on the Chaparral. They had some positives with it, but I thought we found some negatives too. And we obviously did, because we just keep building them. And hell, Penske's, we did them in a week, where Jim Hall, he couldn't do it in years. And I'm not trying to knock Jim. He didn't build it. Bernard built that whole friggin' car when Jim saw it, the first time he saw it. They tell me that he never even went to England to watch it being built, you know?
Wow.
And this is the way a lot of the teams worked. You know, they'd buy those Marshes, and they'd never know what the hell they were buying, you know? They just would buy it, and that's it. And that's kind of the way that era went. Well, that's the era with Penske. Now, I'm able, and he gives me permission. I call him at 3 o'clock in the morning lots of times, because my subconscious mind is so friggin' active that I wake up I'm dreaming of an idea, and it's something I think will work better on the race car maybe. And Roger always liked it if I'd call him late at night, and he didn't mind it. In other words, he always answered the phone. His mama never answered it. He answered it all the time. When I'm testing, he's by a phone all the time. And so when I'm testing and I get an idea, I'll call him. And did lots of times 3 o'clock in the morning for him. Of course, it was some hours later, But the same way with me. I got to where I had to start having a pad next to my bed because I get so many ideas, and some of them worked, And Roger just loved it. Man, I mean, one time, he is so supportive. One time I'm down at Phoenix, and when you run in the winter, the air's cold, and so the air's thick, and your car's going to run better and handle better. So when you get down close to when we ran, this probably was, I'm just going to guess, April. It's getting warm down in Phoenix. And March, April, it's getting warm. So you go back down, you test in the winter, November, December, January, you go fast. You go back in April, damn thing is stuck. It won't go fast. So you got to figure that one out. And you figure out that the hot air is everywhere in that whole valley. You ain't going to go fast the same way you did in November or December. Well, I figured out that. But I called Roger one time, told him, I said, hey, we're having... I got to call him at the end of every day. That's a promise. Got to happen. So that's not the 3 a.m. call. That's at the end of the day. So I call Roger and tell him, no, we're having trouble. We're stuck, and we just got to get through something. But I tell him, I said, I think maybe it's the heat, maybe it's the engine. I said, this engine I find out wasn't dynoed. They just passed it through. So I got pissed, I mean, if I don't know what power we're getting out, maybe I'm chasing the wrong ball in the game, And that happened with Dan and I a couple of times, And so I'd work around that and make sure, well, this one time that I called him, and I tell him we're stuck. We just can't seem to get any speed, any good speed, And McGee is the chief. And I've been talking to Jim. Jim's a really good friend. Man, we were good friends when he was even the enemy, And so I'd go and find out that this engine went through. They had to have a spare, but they don't normally take a spare. Okay, where's the dyno sheets on it? Man, I read dyno sheets really good. I had 2 of them over here. And so I found out engine never was dynoed. I says, well, what's the timing on it? And then I find out how they've been setting the timing. And I just blew up, I just said, this ain't going to work. I mean, we can't. No, we're spending a lot of money and a lot of opportunity for me, but if I'm stopped because they can't get the engine on the dyno before it leaves, to heck with you, you're not doing it. And so I got mad over that. You know what that Roger did? He got out of bed, came out in his Learjet, kaboom. He was here the next morning with a suit and tie on, He took his jacket off, he takes his tie off, lays it somewhere, and he's working with me on the car. And he's really pissed because who decides that they send an engine out without it being on the dyno, without knowing is there a problem with it? Man, oh man, I used to see a lot of that, and so we had new rules. The boss was there, so when he left, we didn't go fast for that test, but when we came back for the race, that was the last test. We came back for the race, it was okay then, everything was up to par, like it should have been,
But that's evidence of a really good relationship, though, between you and RP.
I mean, he would let me do anything. I mean, I used to try some weird shit, and sometimes it worked, sometimes Obviously it didn't, you know. It
brother...
never was the cheating, you know. Al and Parnelli, we all did a talk about down at in Florida, Media Island.
Yep.
And it was over the Offies, because they had the last of the Offie drivers down there. But nonetheless, those guys turned us to some of the things that I did when they're doing their little talks, you know. And that goddamn brother of mine always saying that Bobby was cheating, always cheating, always cheating. And I finally told Al, I said, I'm tired of hearing the fucking cheating. I said, man, you guys could have had the same shit I had. You know, I had a turbocharger that was a little bit different than the other guys. Well, that means we went down to Air Research and got it made. Talked to the guys that know about that, not some goddamn suit guy, you know, it's got a tie on. And so I get a different turbocharger than everybody else had. They could have had it. All they had to do is go down there and ask for it. It made them fucking race cars go fast.
And that was our man, Uncle Bobby. Just classic Uncle Bobby. What else is there? There's nothing boring with Uncle Bobby. There's no amount of truth that can be stretched beyond its limits. There's no conflicting statements that could not be more conflicty. Just love the guy. Truly, truly one of the world's, not motor racing, the world's greatest gifts. And I hope we have Uncle Bobby around for 500 more years, because he is just an eternal gift of amazing stories and amazing perspectives and self-awareness. Who needs that? All right. As always, I'm Marshall Pruett. This is the Marshall Pruett Podcast, presented by Cooper Tires. Thank you for listening.